Hey, it's Drybear. The Dune Awakening beta weekend is over, and so we're kind of on that final stretch of getting towards launch. However, there was another official Funcom broadcast on Saturday going over the event. They had a streamer war going on as well. However, I skipped that whole stream because the weekend was limited as about the amount of time we could play, and I wanted to get as much playtime in so I could try all the classes, all the combinations, explore tier 1 and tier 2 as much as possible, do every dungeon, that sort of thing. So I focused on gaming and getting footage. However, what I wanted to do once the beta is over is to go back to that dev stream and collect all of the dev comments. So we're not going to go over what happened to the streamer wars and all that stuff. I'm going to talk mostly about the dev perspectives because they had several devs, senior game directors, senior art directors, senior game designers and stuff that talked about the game, their opinion on it, their opinion on the beta, and the features. So today I wanted to recap all of that. So let's dive into the first major topic, which will be Endgame. This is a survival game through and through, and I think it's more important that players that play the game treat it as such, because at its core, it is indeed a survival game, and this will seep its way into every aspect of the game, activities, the gameplay loop, the combat, all of that. So for Endgame, let's talk about what's available, as I know this is a hot topic for a lot of people. There's plenty of people out there that will not be playing Dune Awakening because a lot of the Endgame is PvP focused. Both the Landsrat area and the Deep Desert are primarily meant for PvP battles, group battles, guild battles, that sort of thing. So let's talk about the overall structure of the progression through the game, as well as the end game as well. Starting with this image, which I think best represents what we're looking at here, and I'll put out a separate video, I think, for the architecture of the servers, the sietches in the worlds, where characters sit, and how those connect together, because I think they do it in a very non-standard way that makes more sense when you understand it. So in the center of the area, you see the Haga Basin. This is going to be your uncontested safe zone. There are PvP areas, like specific designated PvP zones inside of the Haga Basin. However, you can see by the stack orientation of this, they very much wanted to limit how many people are inside of a Haga Basin layout. So there is a world, which is your overall server, which is going to be connected through everything available in the game is connected through a single server, and you can treat these essentially as the server for any other MMO that you're connected on. It's the world. However, in areas that are going to have a lot of traffic or just have everyone safe in that safe zone, Haga Basin, there are layers, which they're calling sietches, a little bit more lore friendly there, but is basically a layer on the Haga Basin that is 40 players. They said they might raise this depending on how it functions, and maybe they have more data after their beta weekend to understand how to do that, but this one is going to be layered. And you're going to start at the bottom, the south side of the Haga Basin, work your way up through tier 1, eventually tier 2 with the Vermilius Gap, and then a little bit into tier 3 with the Haga Rift and different areas there, before you eventually have to take the Ornithopter out, right? So in order to leave the Haga area here, you will need to get a ornithopter that will allow you to fly to the Deep Desert. And the Deep Desert is your end game experience. This is a contested area with high amounts of resources, high volume of resources, but also is fully PvP. At the very south area of Deep Desert, there is PvE only areas and some campaign progression, but for the most part is a contested area that you will fight your way through. Then, depending on your choice for faction, the two factions that are broadcast in the game are the Atreides as well as the Harkonnen. There will be a third secret faction that I won't mention in the video, but it is something that has been teased and talked about a little bit, and these are going to be your social hubs. You will find your faction advisors here. This is where you will find the world exclusive marketplace that you will be able to buy and sell things on, and the amount of things that you can buy and sell here are extensive. You can sell a base layout if you copy your base layout and sell it to someone else. They just want to put down a blueprint of your base. You can sell water, you can sell resources, you can even sell a scouting map detail for the latest unveiling of the area. So depending on your faction, you'll go to like Arakis or to the Harko village, and you don't necessarily need an ornithopter to get here. There are a few secret ways to get from the layered area Haga Basin into these, but that's kind of like the basic flow. You will spend most of your time initially in the Haga Basin building up your base, going through the tiers, completing the tutorial, and doing your journeys. And then for Endgame, it will be very political focused, like, you know, geopolitics on everything, going into the deep desert, fighting for resources, and grouping up with your guild, as well as the area that don't show here, which is the Landsrad. So deep desert's more about fighting for resources. Landsrad is more of a political control. They have, you know, it's a giant region with multiple areas in it that can be controlled by a specific faction, and there's benefits and bonuses for that. But they also mentioned that inside of these, the Landsrad area, you will get special faction quests that take you in there to get special rewards or more rep with your faction and that sort of thing. So the whole end game is focused around maintaining your base and keeping things built up and resourced, but also visiting Deep Desert, visiting Landsrad, and going to the social hubs to maintain that. But you'll notice that the Landsrad and the Deep Desert are both heavy PvP contested areas, which means that a lot of the super hyper end game is going to be PvP focused. It doesn't mean that you can't avoid that if you would like to focus on, you know, being a groundskeeper for your guild's base or your own base, or potentially just playing around with selling resources and avoiding contact with other players if you wanted to. But there's going to be a very big incentive for doing end game PvP from that front. They also mentioned that the Deep Desert listed up here is primarily for PvP, but they did mention that the Landsrad, the faction warring area, is going to have a ton of cosmetics in it. So different swatches or color combinations for which you can apply to your base, you can apply to your vehicles, you can apply to yourself, transmogs for armor looks that you want to have, faction related items based on who sent you to the Landsrad, as well as other customizations that might come with that as well. So Deep Desert very focused on high density of materials, including spice, and then Landsrad focused on a lot of cosmetics and faction items and bonuses that you might want to get related. So let's talk a little bit about PvP in general. There's definitely some things that need to be addressed before launch. One of them we did talk about a little bit, and they did mention they will be making a fix for it, which is going to be the stun locking in PvP. So there's a couple things just generally from a PvP perspective that we need to address. The first one I feel like is kind of controversial, which is around the visibility of other players in the world. So as it stands right now, other players will have no UI elements or game elements to show themselves off to you out in the open areas, which means that how your character looks, like the one on screen, is how other players will look overall. And from this beta weekend, we saw a lot of people confuse NPCs for players. Oftentimes you'll run up to someone will come attack you and it's like, this is an NPC? Is this a player? I can't tell. And also, even when they did the big streamer encounter of like all, 5 streamers versus 5 streamers in the big PvP battle, there were plenty of times where teammates were attacking each other, they were getting confused. So that's kind of that perspective. So let's listen in on what the devs say about this kind of idea, like the low visibility of other players in a PvP contested zone.
That's interesting, because the way that we've thought of it is, it's not necessarily the actual PvP that you need to be, like, you might fear it, but it doesn't mean that it will happen. So we have pockets in the in South Haga Basin in the Haga Basin where if you go there, you might be extra on alert, basically, but it doesn't mean that PvP will happen. However, you might come across someone, and then I really like the moments where you stand and look at someone, it's like, okay, are they going to attack me or not?
Like we doing this? You want to go?
Yeah. And what we want is that cool. You make a friend or an enemy. Either is fine, but then when you get towards the end game, you might come across the same person there, and it's like, oh, I remember not liking that guy, and then you might have something.
Oh, I love that.
Which is certainly true for the uncontested areas, primarily anything that has a layered siege, so like Haga Basin, so all the areas of Haga Basin, including the areas that we didn't get to explore in the beta weekend that we just experienced. But their goal is to make it very clear that you're in a PvE or PvP contested area for the people that like PvE versus PvP and vice versa. Most of what you're going to see, at least in the Haga Basin areas, is that the ship wreckages are all PvP contested zones, and they do have some very important resources that you need. Mostly when you're trying to progress from tier 1 to 2 to 3, you're going to need a lot of plasteel and of the mechanical parts and things like that. And there will be an okay amount of PvP, at least in the beta, right? So like I went to tons of wreckages many times, and I only had one major like 1v1 duel. And now obviously I could have spent the whole weekend sitting in the wreckage PvP zones waiting for people to show up, but it wasn't as common just because the sieges are limited to 40 people, right? So you would need one of the other 39 people in your siege to go to that same wreckage at the same time and be ready to fight. But again, you also kind of have the idea of, you know, not noticing whether someone's a player or an NPC that's trying to set up for you. Obviously, if they do something very player-like, like try to hide behind a desk and not do anything, it becomes a lot more obvious. But some of the times, you know, you could have players, you know, pretending to be NPCs or, you know, anything in between from that standpoint, which does create unique and interesting gameplay from that element, but also does create some questions around how that's going to function once we have a larger player base set up, and also once players get very experienced at the game. And I think that's kind of the problem they're going to have with closed beta players that go into launch, is they're going to be very experienced on where to go for all the resources, and then you're also going to have problems of major guilds that either want to grief or hoard resources or cut people off, which always happens in these kinds of games. And some of those problems are very evident in the 5v5 streamer contest that we saw. Keep in mind that they were tier 3, like all the way through Haga Basin, with steel items and things like that for their contest, which is not what was available technically in the beta. Everyone was limited to iron unless you're willing to kind of super farm and waste your time trying to get steel super hardcore. But look at the streamer battle and see if you can determine who's on whose side, who's fighting for who, and kind of listen to the streamer reactions. Also keep in mind that the sound was in and out for the stream, so you might hear some like virtual audio cable crackling and things like that, but it is a good representation.
I see right there. We're going in then. We're going in then. I hit one.
Okay, well. Guys, we could talk about this.
He's feeling that.
Guys, we could talk about this.
What is this? Ah! I'm being floated.
Guys, we could talk about this. I killed one. Oh, this is unfair. This is
one shot by a turret. Holy shit.
This guy just rezzed himself.
Wait, which ones are you guys?
I don't know.
I won it.
Oh, my shield is gone.
And in that, you can even hear Emiru say, wait, which ones are you guys? And many times through this combat, you can see actual teammates shooting at each other, and then shooting at enemies, and then back at each other. And then, like, you melee people run up to their teammate. There's even a point where Shroud's teammate ran up and started trying to melee him because they couldn't tell who was who in that situation. So I think that's definitely something to keep an eye on. And also begs the question around friendly fire, because when the game was first being shown, they actually have the base game have pure, true friendly fire, which means if you throw a grenade in a group of people, if your teammates, your squad mates, or guild mates are in the AoE, they will be hit by it and take full damage from it. And if you're meleeing and shooting teammates, you will end up taking damage from that as well. So let's see where the expert game designer talks about friendly fire and also some of the things they've done in the closed beta for testing.
Now, obviously something to maybe talk about here as well, since they're finding themselves in those skirmishes against multiple enemies. They are currently in a guild, not in a group.
Right. Yeah.
Now I understand that AoE damage and also AoE CC would affect the group members or the guild members, but not equally.
So we had feedback, we had a situation where we wanted to allow clean PvE cooperative play, where if we're fighting together against one NPC and you're in melee, I want to go in and help. Players were experiencing that. They ended up hitting each other too often with a melee play, with a grenade. So we took the feedback on and said, you know, friends want to be friends, they want to play together. We'll be gentle and we'll disable, at the time, guild damage and party damage. We let that go live for a bit in the persistent beta, and then the feedback came back again. Actually, this makes the game far too easy. We want to be able to play together as a party, but the guild aspect of it, the players wanted us to pull it back. Said another way, if you're in a party together, slow blade, please.
No, please.
No, slow blade.
Tyler, slow blade. Come on, give it to us.
Whoa, right. So in group play as a party. Oh, there we go. Just took them a hot second.
Yeah. Woo!
Congratulations. That was the path of not least resistance. As a party, you will not take direct damage from your friends. You will take 25% AoE damage and 100% CC effects from your party members. Now, if you are shot by a guild friend in a PvP zone, you'll just take the full effect. Direct damage, AoE damage, and CC.
So it's definitely beneficial to group up rather than just guild up. But then group sizes just 4 players, including the leader, right? So you're obviously more limited. But whereas our players here, our streamers, they're a group of 5.
The challenge is in coordinating your groups. The path of least resistance in some cases is just to drop a whole bunch of AoE down on one spot. Everyone grenade out, and then the problem is cleared out. That resulted in generally not fun gameplay because everyone is immune to damage, or at least reduced, so we decided to pull that back.
And there's definitely some truth to what was mentioned there, right? Like if you make friendly fire completely abusable to the point where there is no friendly fire, people just fill a room with explosives when they know there's enemies inside without having to be a little bit more careful. I think there's definitely a big part of that as well. And sometimes too, if you have no friendly fire, things get a little freaky with how you position your players and who you attack from that standpoint. But having too much friendly fire can be a problem as well. It means that it kind of heavily disincentivizes melee in group play, because it means that now you're putting yourself in harm's way when your teammates are using long-range weaponry. So that sort of thing is a big problem as well. So let me know what you think about friendly fire setups in survival games like this, and also just what the devs think about friendly fire and what they've tested. Again, they seem very confident the game is super amazing based on their internal testing, friends and family, as well as their very hush-hush closed NDA only closed beta. But a lot of this is kind of questions of like, when they open up the game to a bigger audience, are those same levels of confidence going to stay the same as before? And also, like, what's going to be necessitated by a larger, not less echo chambery style group of people going to be picking up the game and playing it, especially people that have had that actually are monetarily invested, that have bought the game at a premium price and are trying to play it for the end game as well. Next, let's talk about the combat. This is probably the hottest topic for the Dune Awakening and where things sit. And again, the devs seem very confident that their combat is really good. They spent a good bit of it, not to be a little bit too direct, but it did seem like they were kind of glazing it quite a bit on the flow of combat feeling really good, the combination of the mechanics feeling really good, the PvP being super interesting, and the idea of how all of that combat comes together being like an ace victory for them in general. But it's also something that gets brought up quite a bit from dissenters who say that the combat doesn't look good, it doesn't feel good, they're not super excited about it. So there's definitely a big rift between people that, are kind of meh about it, the devs that are super excited about it, and maybe some of the closed beta testers that are excited about it, and then the people that are saying they're not going to play the game simply because the combat isn't up to a level of quality that they hope for. And to kick off the discussion of combat, let's look at the thing that hopefully is changing for launch, which is the perma stun lock that you can do with the light attacks of the melee, which we saw in rampant amounts across all of the streams and broadcasters from the weekend.
Yeah, we're kind of doing a melee game.
Yeah!
Oh, I'm getting comboed. Oh, God. I'm so dead.
What is this? Bro, I have no stamina.
I'm getting cooked. I'm getting cooked, man. I'm getting cooked.
No.
I'm hitting my ulti. Press something. Stop just swinging at me, bro. What is this? It's the dagger meta. Wait, jump on the bike! Just something! What the f is this?
So for the people that didn't play, let me give you an overview of the combat, how it works, and kind of what's happening with this stun lock. So the system overall allows you to choose either a ranged weapon or a melee weapon that have their own, stipulations on what they're good at. So you'll spend a lot of time playing between ranged and melee, and they even, by the dev's own admission, say that they want you to kind of dabble in melee, ranged, and abilities to make a full kit that functions well for you. However, having just a pure ranged versus pure melee combat system doesn't work that well in a survival game like this, because obviously the ranged weapons have an advantage. So to counteract that and also be true to the source material of Dune, they have included the Harkonnen shields, which allows you to avoid pretty much all damage. So anytime you see either yourself or an enemy with that blue overlay, that means they currently have a shield active. Damage done to the player when they have that shield open will not damage their health, but instead will damage their power source. So everyone has a power source equipped, a power generator that allows them to use, gliding while flying through the air, and some things require more of your power pack in order to do it, but it also includes your personal shield, your Harkonnen shield. So you'll actually be able to avoid all damage while that shield is up in order to use your power bar as a second resource. Which begs the question, if while the shield is open you take no damage, how exactly do you counter that? And there are several ways. First of all, damage over time, so like poison or bleed, will go through shields, and that kind of encourages a lot of the poison builds that you'll get from Mentat and some of the bleeding tricks that you'll get later on as well to deal damage directly through the shield. So that is one way. The other way is that if you overpower the shield with multiple people, I haven't really seen this happen in a 1v1 situation, but if you have 3 people firing weapons that don't do damage to shields all at once, the shield will just be overpowered and just be disabled for a short time so you can deal damage to the target. So you can circumvent it that way. The next way is kind of related to what we talked about with the energy source, right? So the power of the personal shield is relying on your personal battery pack in order to charge it. And there are abilities like the trooper abilities or the Mentat abilities that will drain power. So you can put up an area where enemies that have a shield active, when they're in this area, their power will drain and eventually the shield will fall off and you can deal damage to them directly. You can even see here in 1v1, dealing normal dart damage to a person with a shield doesn't do too much unless you can do enough damage to break their power pack, but for the most part, you're not really dealing any damage to them directly. However, for melee, they have a major advantage in melee in that it allows them to circumvent shields by doing a slow attack. In the lore in Dune, the shields themselves avoid like lots of damage or fast damage. However, they're weak to slow damage, and so you can do a heavy attack with your melee weapon called a slow blade. So it's a lunge attack where you lunge forward and you'll stab it into the target and then slowly push through their shield and deal damage to their health behind it. So this is kind of like the primary way to deal damage with the melee. So you have all these different tools. You can do damage over time through the shield. You can do enough damage to break the power pack to avoid them from avoiding that damage in the first place. You can use the slow blade from the melee. And there's also a specific weapon type called a disruptor that is a rapid fire SMG that if enough darts stick through the shield, it'll cause the shield to turn off for a second so you can deal damage that way. And this is when I played my Swordmaster, so I can show you what I'm talking about here. Shield goes up on the enemy. Melee attacks normally won't do any damage to the target, but then you can do the slow blade, which locks you and the target in place. It slowly goes to the shield. It pulses red and you can deal damage through the shield that way. However, what they've done in the current build of the game is that the light attack for melee doesn't consume stamina and it will still stagger the target even though they have a shield up as a normal melee attack would. And when dealing with the enemies, like the NPCs, you can actually slash them once with a light attack to cause them to stagger, and then you can do the slow blade attack to get through. However, because they don't take stamina when you swing and it still staggers the enemy, it means in group combat you can actually just spam melee light attack over and over and over and over with no restriction. And in this game, the only way to break out of staggers is by dashing, which consumes a bunch of stamina. So if the target you're spamming on runs out of stamina from dashing, you can actually just perma stun lock them in this place over and over and over again with nothing that they can do about it.
Get another one.
Oh my god.
They revive?
They can revive, I think.
What's happening, guys? You've just witnessed some absolute chaos.
This is chaos, indeed.
Talk us through what we've seen.
But the cool thing, I think, the great thing, I think, is that Shroud, he's using the tapper, which is probably a schematic he found by exploring earlier.
Oh, he's getting staggered. Oh, no, he doesn't have stamina. He can't get out. He doesn't have stamina. He's got 0 stamina.
And yeah, there's no way he can recover now, right?
No.
But the other one is not even using slow blade.
Listen, we can talk about this.
We can talk about this.
Push him all the way to warm territory. That would be even better.
Please just talk about it.
I think Alex and Villa talked about this. We're working on something that will help this situation, because you should never be in a situation like this. You should never be stagger locked like this.
Yes.
So that by launch we'll fix that for sure. This is not intentional.
I love how much. I love how you guys are like, we'll just fix it, no worries. Nah, man's getting
It's
cut.
just bullying at this point.
Oh, this is so mean.
Look at
Oh my
Tyler,
god.
he's loving it. Nah, he's enjoying that too
Oh my
much.
god, that was.
So was that it?
So you can see in that clip the effect of it, but they did mention that that is on the list for them to address for launch, and they did float some ideas on how they plan to solve it, but it sounds like they might be leaning on just making it so the light attack with a melee weapon consumes stamina. This might have some implications on the efficacy of melee gameplay, especially when we're talking about deep desert combat between other players, like a big group of enemies. They come in, is melee going to be a big part of that or not? I guess we'll just have to see, but it is worth highlighting from that standpoint as well. Now, some of the PvP is going to be survival game-esque, and what I mean by that is it's more about positioning and preparedness than it is about actual combat prowess. So this is a clip of me. I was in a PvP zone looting a ship, and I had a ton of really good resources. However, I went out with a ranged build, and I didn't bring a disruptor with me, which means I had no real response to enemy shields. So I ended up having to force melee, but because of the desyncs and lag and things like that, it became very difficult, and I ended up losing this battle at the end. Spoiler alert, lost a lot of resources for it. So there's just kind of a question of when we get full launch with everyone on the servers playing and they're out in the deep desert with full skills, or the actual vehicle drops and stuff, how is the combat going to feel? How is it going to function? And how do we manage the shield versus no shield and the visibility of other players out in the field as well? So let me know what you think about that topic specifically. And that's honestly my biggest complaint about that, is just how melee feels in look, this is the melee experience I had at pretty much all situations with other players. With NPCs, that's not too bad, but with other players, I had a lot of these situations where you see I start the heavy attack, he moves away like it's not even happening, he hits me, and then I move and I try to dodge, but then I warp back away, or he's attacking somewhere where I'm not, and then he attacks that. It just gets it's just super warpy and wanky from that. I was trying to parry that, but that took stamina when I got hit. I tried to hit it, I can stagger him, and I try to go for a heavy attack, but the heavy attack doesn't start, and then I get forced out, and everything in between. And overall, it seems like the devs are very pleased with the general strategy and flow for combat, the mix between ranged weapons, melee weapons, and shields, as well as abilities and everything put in between.
It's great. We have taken inspiration from many genres, but we are no single one genre. We have very many elements. We have shooting, melee combat, ability combat, and even vehicular combat. Vehicular combat comes on significantly in the later portions of the game. As players come online in the early parts of the game, they will use their melee, they'll use their range tools and abilities to overcome challenges, like we're seeing on the screen here. We see our characters shoot their way through glory. As players progress further and further as well, they'll encounter shielded characters that must be specifically managed with in a very, very authentic way. Only the slow blade penetrates the shields. However, that is not the only tool. We have abilities to overpower them, and we also have a few unique items that are Dune unique to pass through shields, like the, what's the name? Drill shot.
Oh, the drill shot, yeah.
Drill shot.
Drill shot, and also poison goes through shields, and we have the disruptor, which is effective at actually taking down the shields as well.
They also mentioned difficulties in blending audiences, and this is true for any game on the planet, to be honest. Different players are going to enjoy games differently. There are some people that want a casual, story mode experience to the game. There's some people that just want to do building and world exploration. There are the people that want to do easy, normal combat, and then you have hardcore players that want the hardest difficulty possible, the most restrictions possible, and the hardest that the game can actually be. And they talk about blending these audiences together and getting them to align on the same page around combat and the challenges that come along with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes if you don't prepare well enough, you might find yourself locked in between doors and running out of ammo. And then you kind of okay, can I actually find some scrap metal here so I can quickly quickly craft a few scraps of ammo and then keep going, basically. But you always have your sword, or you should have anyway, to fall back to, and abilities, as we say. And they don't come at a high cost. It's only stamina cost, basically. So you should be able to get out of most situations. But preparing and knowing what you're going into is very helpful.
I love that this is the only game where I feel like me running away can be considered a tactical retreat.
Tactical withdrawal.
It's definitely, it's that. It's not me running away or being underprepared whatsoever. But obviously, I assume you guys have been given a lot of feedback to the different type of combat. How do you work through that kind of feedback?
Gently, slowly, and with a lot of respect. I would say one of the hardest things is, for me personally, I play very, very intense games on the side, and working with Dune, you have a audience that is both expecting a very narrative experience and one that really wants to excel and display mastery. And having both of those audiences play the same game is usually a hard challenge to deliver in a way where everyone is super satisfied. I would say we did our job as good as we could. We walked through all of the feedback and we tried to massage it and land the experience in a place where people have enough space to display mastery and excellence, but also are challenged in a way where they're not completely overpowered by the experience. Like Ville was talking about a moment ago, the sun is trying to burn you, the worm is trying to eat you, you have NPC content that's running around, the sandstorm is coming, you need to make your way through the world.
Which is a big thing for a lot of developers and is incredibly difficult. Oftentimes, even games that aren't trying to mix player bases will have different player bases in their game that have, like, if they have a ranked mode, there might be the low-ranked players, the mid-ranked players, the high-ranked players, and then we'll call them like the exception, which is, you know, at the very highest level, your grandmaster, challenger, global elite, whatever you want to call it, whatever ranked game you're talking about, the 1% or the 0.5% that are at the top that are just excellent at everything that they do, and putting those together is a big challenge. However, based on their own admission, they do say that their goal is to make the game as approachable as possible. It is a Dune inspired game. It is a survival game and an exploration game, and they don't want everyone to be completely put off by the combat themselves.
So it's been a fine line to walk because we wanted it to be an approachable game. So not just hardcore players would enjoy it, but anyone who just want to play a good game, right? On the other hand, it's the harshest planet in the universe. So how do you balance those? And what we did was being lenient in some areas, but then giving you a big heads up. This is where you really, really, really need to be careful. So that's how we balance that. But it's been quite challenging to make those come together because they don't often gel, I feel. But I sometimes think that, like, this game came together so well, even despite all these challenges that we had, or maybe because of them, because we were challenged ourselves to actually be a little bit more clever with how we do things, and also iterating, and listening to all the feedback that we get. And we listen to all the feedback, we don't necessarily implement all the feedback. There's a distinction there.
Now, during the AMA they did last week, they also had some direct questions around the combat in general and how it feels. One of the responses they had is that the goal is to switch between melee, range, and ability as fun and intense. Playing optional like this is highly encouraged. So in their mind, using everything, melee, ranged, and ability is the optimal way to play the game. And they also mentioned that, however, we're still working on combat and have some exciting melee updates on the way, which is separate from the stun locking issue and more just focused on expanding the way melee functions right now. Well, the question was, verbatim, the gunplay looks a little bit rough sometimes, but even more alarming, melee feels very bad right now. Are you guys aware of this, and will there be fixes for both? Which the creator director responds with, you should play it first if you're only looking at it. They mentioned that there are some people that look at it and think it's bad but haven't tried it, and so he encourages people to try it and see it. They also say set expectations according to the game. We're doing a lot of features that are more than other combat games, and combat isn't the primary focus. And they also mentioned that we'll be continuing to update the systems as we update the game post-launch. Also, during the live stream, they mentioned that they're very happy with where combat is, and they even talked about how it is a higher APM compared to other games. A lot of other games, you're going to be using abilities and moving around. And to them, it's a high APM, highly engaging encounter for the combat itself.
Slowblade in the version that's here, because there's stuff that we reacted to from the player feedback that we'll tease about maybe in a few moments. In the version that we're seeing on screen, players must disable the opponent to be able to push through their shield. Here, we did not disable the opponent correctly. Let's hide and disable. 1, Oh, there's unshielded. Whenever a character chooses to shoot out of a shield, the shield will go down. You risk yourself by being able to send bullets out from your character. This is actually one of the most challenging elements to nail in a game that has both melee and shooting, because it is a seesaw that is never perfectly balanceable. And the shield and the narrative that it provides is almost the ideal solve for this dynamic, where we have shields allow players to engage with each other at melee and at range, but also not instantly evaporate because the time to kill is very, very high. Or sorry, excuse me, the time to kill is very, very low, so you die very quickly. It gives people the ability to react to situations that would normally would not be as engaging or as fun to be in.
I think this is the perfect game for that, actually, because the number of actions that you do second to second is higher than in many games, because as we said, there's melee, there's range, there's ability, and you're actually expected to use all of them in combination.
You even have the host of the event going as far as to say that the combat is so different that it's not really what you would expect from a game like this, or really any game you've experienced before.
You really admired the fact that it's so different to anything you've ever experienced.
It is, and I think that's going to be, I don't want to use the word off-putting, although I just literally said it, but if you're coming from different kind of genres, different kind of games, like you have an idea of how a combat works. Yep. I felt personally when I started getting into Dune Awakening that it was so much more about positioning, about engaging and disengaging and re-engaging. It wasn't really much about like hitting my shots that much. So can you walk us through the differences in the approach here?
I would say that everyone has a place that everyone has played games beforehand, and they come into this game with a perspective that they personally develop. I like shooting, I like range play, I like abilities, or I like melee. We try not to force you into any one path, but we synergize all three of those aspects in a way such that your character will be more effective as long as you touch all three. And by touching and using all three aspects, you'll be able to flow through the combat. Like everything flows into everything else. Shooting flows into your melee flows into your ability play flows back into your melee. And you go in and out and in and out. And it's a dance between characters that eventually, as long as you manage your resources, manage your cooldowns, your consumables, you will succeed.
This video is already way too long as it is. I'll stop it there for that. Let me know what you think about the dev responses as well as the contentious aspects of Dune Awakening and where you were at with the game launching in just under a month now going into June. So June 5th is the early start, June 10th is the full launch, but let me know what you think about that down below. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.